We have been lied to. We have been deceived. And I've been saying for years, the moment that moms find out what's going on behind closed doors in their children's schools, there's going to be a national revolt. And that is exactly what you're seeing.
Well, what we have learned is that there are members of Congress who aren't really representing the values that we care about as moms.
When you start telling moms they're not your kids, they're going, what are you talking about?
The main reason why we've been losing is because we've been fighting principle with policy. We need to fight principle with principle, because when we do, freedom wins.
What America is going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years from now, you are deciding it today. Motherhood is a great unifier, and mothers of all political persuasions are uniting together to defend and protect their children. And Moms for America is giving them a powerful voice and platform to be able to do that. You are creating the future of our country, and if you don't like what we see, you have the power to turn it around. When my children and my grandchildren ask me, where were you when the Republic was hanging in the balance? I am going to be able to tell them, I was right there, fighting to my last breath to save it. If you think that this mom-led revolution is just a little thing that's going to come and go, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Hi everyone, I'm Bruce Karasik, co-founder of the Jewish Republican Alliance. Thank you for joining us today. Our special guest, Kimberly Fletcher, seems to be delayed, so we're going to get right into our show. This week, I watched an interview on Hannity featuring Governor Gavin Newsom. I must admit, my eyebrows shot higher than our national debt when I saw a Democrat leader speaking so articulately, unapologetically. He bravely ventured into Hannity's turf, ready to joust with words. When you contrast this with Joe Biden, who these days seems to be more like a silhouette than a substantial leader, you realize that Newsom didn't exactly need to leap over a high bar to surpass Biden. It's more like beating a turtle in a sprint. Biden's performance, to say the least, has been a downward trend, like a skier who missed the slowdown sign as we struggle to make sense of his speeches, and then sadly have to watch him physically declining, falling while walking down and upstairs. Indeed, Joe Biden has a knack for continually surpassing his previous lows. During a speech this week, Biden said, and I quote, "We have plans to build a railroad from the Pacific all the way across the Indian Ocean," a proposal that left people wondering whether he's confusing infrastructure plans or a new James Bond movie. The internet was quick to turn out memes, and it wasn't a difficult task for Governor Newsom to appear respectable on Hannity's platform. However, when the glossy image fades away and one peels back the layers, it's a whole different story. Sometimes it feels like Californians have memory shorter than a goldfish when it comes to recalling Governor Newsom's reign. Remember the governor who treated California like his personal castle and locked it all down? The governor who enforced draconian lockdowns across California, closing restaurants, while himself indulging at the luxurious French Laundry restaurant. And when caught, he called it a mistake. It's more like a grand bouquet of hypocrisy and a slap in the face of all Californians and Americans alike. He closed beaches and hair salons. Many of us had to resort to getting homemade haircuts. My home haircuts made me look more like SpongeBob for most of 2020, while his former family member, Nancy Pelosi, was caught sneaking into a private salon visit. During my opening speech at the event we did with Larry Elder for the recall election of 2021, I painted a detailed picture of Governor Newsom, highlighting extravagant spending, his disregard for small businesses, his alarming propensity to release prisoners. I pointed out his love for imposing taxes and his failure to manage resources. resulting in widespread power outages. I questioned his decisions to squander millions on social distancing billboards, studies on vaping, and support for undocumented immigrant businesses while crime rates soared. I called him a French laundry eating, sanctuary state loving, wasteful spending, criminal enabling, mail-in vote cheating, felon enriching, small business closing governor. I went on to say that he was a bullet train building, gas taxing, property taxing, sales taxing spender. And then I called him a criminal clemency granting, jail unlocking, poverty rate multiplying, homeless camp building governor. I kept going as the crowd cheered and called him a school closing, police defunding, poor forest managing, power outage creating, freedom robbing, liberty canceling governor. And then I asked the audience, and I ask you now, would you have spent $80 million of the people's hard-earned money on billboards to remind people to social distance? Would you have spent $20 million of the people's hard-earned money, their tax dollars, to study the effects of vaping? Would you have spent $50 million of the people's hard-earned tax dollars on funding illegal alien businesses? Gavin Newsom did all of that. And with crime at an all-time high, would you have released thousands of criminals from prison? He did. Remember the old age wisdom of saving for a rainy day, of being proactive. As Californians suffered penalties for watering their lawns, Newsom welcomed countless undocumented immigrants, providing them with resources while citizens endured hardship. And instead of constructing reservoirs for future rainfall, he remained unprepared, leading to wasted water resources during last winter's record downpours. To sum it up, in the last 75 years, Israel transformed a barren desert into an oasis. Meanwhile, Governor Gavin Newsom managed to reverse California's fortunes and turn it from an oasis to a desert in a remarkably short time. That, my friends, is my perspective on Joe Biden and Gavin Newsom. Thank you all for joining us. And now it is my privilege to introduce to you, live from Franklin, Tennessee, fellow JRA co-founder, Mitch Silberman. Mitch.
Hello, JRA community. It is always so great when we are together. Bruce, one of your finest speeches ever. So I've got a pop quiz for everybody. What do Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, and Joe Biden all have in common? No, they're not all mass murderers. Well, Biden does have a year and a half left in his term, but based on what's going on, you never know. Just joking, maybe. No, what they've all done is they've all gone on the record and said that, no, they are not your kids. They are our kids. They belong to all of us. Your children belong to all of us. Now, why would he say such a thing? You know, growing up, we all heard that phrase, the Hitler Youth, and we never really thought about it. In fact, it was a punchline in one of the funniest movies of all time. Animal House, there's a scene where one of the major characters gets beat up by a rival fraternity who are obviously right-wingers and probably white supremacists, right? And when his fraternity brothers said, "Who did this to you?" he said, "Oh, Greggy, Dougie, and the other Hitler Youth," and we all laughed. But why is it that totalitarians and tyrants and dictators go after the children? Sadly, it's a very effective way to take power and control, because one of the most foundational, important institutions we have as Americans is the family, is the nuclear family. And when you tear that apart, you know, children are very malleable, they're easy to indoctrinate, and they literally are going to grow up and run the world. So if you can turn parents into caretakers, then you really take control, you sow chaos. And that's exactly what they've done. I mean, we've been warned for years they are coming for our children. Well, they're here. It's happening now. So the key is, what do we do about it? Well, one of the most crucial things we do is we have to win next year in the elections, okay? Now, Bruce is correct when he talks about cheat by mail. Yes. So we need election integrity. We have to play by the new rules, not just voting on, you know, the day of the election. But we have to convince others. We have to wrestle them away from this destructive Democratic Party. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions and some suggestions here that you can talk with your friends and family that are center left. Now, if they're on the left, as I've said, don't bother. There's just no point. But if they're center left, here's a question. Here's two questions for them. Do you think it's appropriate to have pornographic material in children's textbooks? And by children, I mean elementary school and middle school. And do you think it's okay for an adult male dressed as a scantily clad woman to be gyrating and dancing provocatively and sexually in front of young children? Now, they're going to answer one of two ways. They're either going to say no, or they're going to say, what are you talking about? They may have no idea. Now, let me tell you what not to do. Do not turn on the fire hose and send them endless emails about columns written by great conservatives about how evil and depraved it is. It is evil. It is depraved. Don't do it. You have a couple of options here. You can say, hey, I invite you to do your own homework. Check it out. It's happening. Or you can send them links or photos from sources they know and trust. Okay? Let them see this for themselves. We have to shake them away from this allegiance to the Democratic Party. Maybe this will wake them up. You know, years ago, I think Sarah Palin talked about, oh, don't upset the grizzly bear or the grizzly mama, mama bear. And I don't even know what was going on then, but it's probably tamed by today's standards. But you've got to wake people up. And then when they realize this is happening, here's what you say. The party you vote for, the party you support is all in on this. They are behind this. Now, notice what I didn't say. I didn't say your party for two reasons. Number one, your party is kind of confrontational and accusatory, and they're going to get defensive. And second thing I've learned, any of you know someone who says, oh, I'm a moderate, I'm a moderate, I'm a registered independent, right? How come self-proclaimed moderates and independents probably voted for Newsom 3 times and voted for Biden? So that's why I said, choose this word, the party you vote for, the party you support, right? They need to see the evil things being done to children. And the party is not even shy about it. They're boldly talking about it. They have these family-friendly drag shows, child-friendly drag shows. How come there's no senior-friendly drag shows? Why are they after our children? So this is where we are. We have to fight to preserve the Judeo-Christian values upon which our beloved country was founded, because they are here now for our children. Now, while we're waiting for Kimberly to join us, and hopefully she will, hopefully all is well, Bruce, I'm going to throw it back to you. You gave a magnificent speech about Biden and Newsom. And I got to tell you, the conservative radio talk show hosts I listen to, they are almost certain, have been saying it for months, that one way or another, Newsom is going to angle himself in to be the nominee. I don't know how that happens, but I'm curious if you see that happening, or if so, how will they pull that off?
Well, I think, thank you, Mitch. I think he's putting his toe in the water, basically. I think he's trying to figure out, is there a lane for him to make this happen without insulting the Democrat Party by criticizing Biden for what the obvious is. In the interview, he restrained to say anything negative about Biden. And when pressed to ask if people are asking him if he's going to run, he kind of avoided the question. Right. And so, you know, I think he would be a much better candidate than Biden. You know, is it in the Republicans' best interest now to destroy Biden before the election, or let him get the nomination and then go after him? So basically, I think the Democrats do want him out, and they're not going to fight too much if they have someone like Newsom in the wings.
Well, there's so many, you bring up so many interesting nuances. So for starters, if something happens to Sleepy Joe, Crooked Joe, whatever President Trump calls him these days, how do they explain to their base that the first woman of color, the first woman VP is not going to be the nominee? That's the first thing they're going to have to deal with, because that's a potential mess right there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
The other angle, of course, is the Democrats are very devious, and so often they're playing three-dimensional chess while we, of course, are playing checkers, or not even playing. And so there's some talk that they actually want Trump to be the nominee. They are doing all they can to make it Trump. They want him to be the one that they run up against. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think it's going to backfire because, they did that the first time. They propped up Trump on all the news channels and the cable news channels. And, they thought he would never get the nomination and it would destroy everybody else. And he came out stronger than ever. And from what I'm reading, ever since his indictment, he's just getting an avalanche of contributions and donations to his campaign. If I was a strategist, I wouldn't go too hard after Biden right now. I would let him sink himself, which he's doing by himself. Let him get the nomination, because then they're really stuck. But to answer your question about what they would do with the vice president, they would do what the left always does. Just ignore the issue and not talk about it. That's what I think would happen.
Yes, they are very good at it. I'll tell you, the elephant in the room, of course, right now that we're all been so consumed with is the indictment. We've heard it all. This is banana republic territory. This is what third world countries do. But I'll tell you, I got a little insight into what the left is thinking. I was at a family wedding last weekend in Newark, New Jersey, not necessarily a hotbed of conservatism. And I was talking to my relatives, and one of them said something very interesting. He said, so they know where I stand, and none of them are on my side, except for my dad. And anyway, one of them said, so are you a Trump guy or DeSantis? And I said, right now I'm Trump. Okay. He says, yeah, but even with all the, the going on with the indictment and the 37 counts, I mean, he's well read, but he said something so interesting, Bruce. He said, well, the difference is, I know you're going to say Biden did it. Why are they going after Trump? Because at least Biden cooperated. Trump didn't cooperate. And I thought about that. I'm like, wow. So that's like, I stole money from the bank, but since I got caught, I gave the money back. We're all good, right? They're not focusing on the crime. If there is no crime here, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, but it's just so interesting how they are so brilliant at spinning it,
You are so right. And that whole argument, Mitch, about he readily turned it over is a false flag, because, I heard Alan Dershowitz's perspective on that. And someone who's accused of a crime does not have to turn over anything. He had no legal obligation to turn that over. And the remedy that they should have used, if they wanted those documents back, was to go to court and get a subpoena and let the judge rule on whether he had to return that or not. And after all those appeals were done, if he in fact still was required by law to turn it over, then he must turn it over. But they should have done it that way. There was no need to ever go to these charges which potentially could put him in jail for the rest of his life, because this was an issue that should have been decided in the courts. I am sure his legal advisor said, hold on to this. Here's how we're going to fight it. And, I think it's going to backfire on them because unfortunately, people are only hearing one side of the story so far.
They really are. They really are hearing one side. It is, it's astonishing and frightening how the media is the Praetorian Guard, and they are doing everything possible to protect Biden, to protect the Democrats. I mean, can you imagine if a Democrat congressperson came out and said, we have 17 tapes of Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. taking bribes, and we saw $10 million, which of course is bupkis for the Trump, but nonetheless, we saw $10 million drop into their account miraculously. The media would go into a feeding frenzy. It would be nonstop 24/7. And that's actually a question you can ask of your friends on the left. Like, ask them, well, do you think if the media found this, learned of this, and it affected Trump and Trump Jr., not Biden and Hunter, do you think that they would not cover it? They would just let it go? I mean, it's truly remarkable. The media really is that powerful, and people really are that easily, I hate to say it, but manipulated.
Well, I certainly would not initiate an impeachment of Joe Biden, even if it was found that he took a bribe. I would if I was a Republican strategist, I would let the Democrats make that impeachment filing. I'd let him be a wounded animal all the way to November and do it that way. Mitch, just to change the subject a little bit, we were talking about California. There was an article that I read this week that kind of, I'm always shocked, but just when I thought I've heard everything. So in California, there's a new bill that's making its way across the legislature. It's called Bill SB 729. And believe it or not, this would require insurance companies to cover the cost of surrogacy for gay and lesbian couples to wish to have children.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is going to raise insurance costs. It's going to raise taxes. It's just unfair to have that happen, in my opinion. And I think it also undermines our culture. I'm all for live and let live. Anybody who's gay or lesbian or whatever they do, they have their right to be what they want to be in America. I just don't want to pay for two men to have babies.
Careful, that makes you a hater, Bruce.
No,
that's what they would say. And it looks like Kimberly is still delayed. Looks like she's about to join us. Kimberly, are you there?
I am here. I am so sorry. Time zones are not my friend this week.
Well, since I moved to Tennessee, it's happened to me more than once.
Man, oh man, I am way more often than it should at these days. But I am in the car, but I can pull off on the side of the road and have a better look.
Yeah, we would hate to do this while you're driving.
You don't want to cause an accident.
That would be a first for JRA LoudSpeaker.
Well, my daughter's driving. I'm riding in the back seat, but still, it would look better if I was not in the back seat. So we're gonna find a little spot here, and I will jump out, and then okay. Thank you guys for being so gracious. I'm so sorry.
So I will tell the audience that when I was still living in LA, I had the most wonderful lunch with John Voight. And he says to me, you know who I love? I love Moms for America. And I said, I'm not familiar. He says, oh, Kimberly Fletcher is wonderful. And because of him, I got introduced to Kimberly, and we've stayed in touch ever since. So when John Voight tells me this is an important organization, I listen.
John Voight is a very good man. I just had lunch with him in Beverly Hills about a month ago. He happened to be in town. I happened to be in town, so we were able to reconnect. Great guy.
He's so learned, such a patriot, and a very intelligent person.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can you pull over?
So Kimberly, we have we told our audience about how there is literally they are I don't know a better way to say it. They are coming for our children. They're not coming. They're here. They are after our children. We were on our show last time. It was tame by today's standards. So tell us for the trenches what you're seeing going on.
Well, I'll tell you, things have dramatically changed in the last 3 years, but really they've stepped it up in the last year and a half. And it's the reason why is because of all the pushback that we've done. I told you guys last time we talked that for, decades, over almost 2 decades, I kept telling parents what was going on in the schools, and they just looked at me like a helicopter parent with a tinfoil hat. And then in 2020, God gave us the greatest blessing when he shined the light on all the darkness, and we were able to see, and I didn't have to convince people anymore. They saw for themselves what their children were up against. But I tell people all the time that what you think is happening in the school, in the classroom, what you think is nothing compared to just how bad it really is. And what our kids are being bombarded with every day is unbelievable. It is child abuse. It is sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. It is pushing things on our children that they are not ready for, that they do not know how to speak to. And they just want their time on the playground and another turn on the swing. Let them have their innocence. But at the same time, I also tell parents, if you're not teaching your kids about sex and about these things, someone else is. Mm. And you may not like what they're learning. I guarantee you actually won't like what they're learning.
No, I agree with you, Kimberly. I have a question for you. Mitch and I, started JRA in March of 2016. So a little over 7 years ago. We didn't want to sit on the sidelines and watch our country go down the tubes. And we decided to take a stand, and we've been doing that for all that time. But what motivated you as a mom to start your organization, Moms for America? I mean, you could have done like so many people and just said, oh, I'm so upset about this, but did nothing. Why did you start it, and how did you take that leadership role?
Well, it was actually 9/11. My husband was stationed at the Pentagon on 9/11. And prior to that, I was just like, every other American. I pledged the flag. I celebrated on 4th of July. I stood for the national anthem. I grew up in that kind of culture. And on 9/11, that was a big wake-up call for me, because I realized that we were fighting a battle that I didn't even, a war, if you will, that I didn't even know was going on. And so when my husband came home safe that day through a series of literal miracles, that was the day that changed me. And I started to ask questions like, how did we get here? And where is this coming from? And our freedom's going to be gone. And that was the day I went from being patriotic to becoming a patriot. And I've been on the front lines of freedom ever since, fighting for our freedoms, our values, and doing it through moms. Because I know that the hand that rocks the cradle isn't just a cute little saying, it's an immortalized fact. And whatever America is going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years, we're deciding it today. So if we can convert the mothers to liberty, if we can show them the truth, then they will share it, and it will change the world. And that's literally what we do at Moms for America. We give back the true story of America, what their rights are, their heritage, where their rights come from, and how to effectively exercise them. And it's a game changer. It makes all the difference in the world when a mother goes in empowered instead of just angry when she's at a school board meeting or talking to a teacher or a principal or in a committee hearing. And these moms now are empowered to go and be able to speak in the public square in a very effective way. And it is making a difference, and from the school board to Congress, and it's incredible.
Kimberly, it's fantastic what you're doing, getting moms involved, waking them up. But there's almost like there's two kinds of moms. There's you, which is, I love you went from being a patriot to or patriotic to a patriot. I love that. Thankfully, there's millions of moms like you. Okay. But there's also the moms that are saying, little Johnny is now little Susie. And I mean, I saw it even on a smaller level. I live in a different world called Nashville. Very different than LA. And even yesterday, I saw in the parking lot a mom opening up the back door, wearing a mask outdoors. And I'm like, why is she wearing a mask? You don't see that often in Nashville. But then she took her little girl out of the back seat, who was maybe 3, with a mask on. And first thing came to my mind, child abuse. And that's a minor level child abuse to me. It's still child abuse. But when you're a mom excited that your kid's going to transition, that's a different kind of mom. Like, how do you reach, or do you not even reach those kind of moms, or just they're part of the enemy, so to speak?
It is challenging, but it is doable. And the biggest problem is we have had decades of losses and haven't even realized it. All of these things that we know that are going on in the schools now, it's not new. They've been going on. We just didn't know that it was happening. So for decades, they have been changing the story of America, indoctrinating our children with various different nefarious ideas. And so you have, moms who are raising children today who have been lied to and deceived in the school system, who are now raising children and buying into these ideas. And some of them realize that this is just, even some of them realize and that it doesn't feel right, even when everything that they've grown up with in the school system and society and culture has told them this is a good idea. But they're afraid to go against this bubble that they associate with. So if they've got, the media is telling them and the people around them are telling, we just need to be nice. We need to be fair to everyone. Well, that's great. But right now, this is Pride Month. And one of the things that really just drives me crazy about this month is how everybody just goes crazy. And they put these flags everywhere. And I was in Salt Lake City, of all places, last week, and I'm driving down the road, and you've got the transgender flag, the gay flag, some other flag I didn't recognize, and then you've got the American flag. And I'm like, 3 of these things do not belong here. And that flag, that the red, white, and blue, that's the one that unites us. That's the one that protects our rights, our values, regardless of who we want to have a relationship with, what we think we are. You want to be a tree, whatever. But the Constitution of the United States, that's what protects the divine inherent rights of all of us, whatever we want to do, as long as we're not infringing on the rights of others. Those other flags are divisional flags. And that's like it's like a gauntlet. They're laying down the gauntlet when they put up those flags, because they're saying, we don't want you to have freedom. We just want to be able to do whatever we want. And you not only have to accept it, you have to embrace it. And you have to teach your children that maybe they're that way too. And that is what I have a major problem with. You do you, I do me, leave my kids alone. And they are not able to leave the kids alone, because that's how the greatest despots in society and in the world have taken over countries. And the truth of the matter is, we are now currently living in Hitler's Germany, Mao's China, and Stalin's Russia. And most of the American people have no idea how desperate this situation is. So the short answer to the long answer to your short question is that the short answer is, we give them the truth, because that's how you win these arguments, is with the truth, because they've been lied to and deceived. And when you can show them common sense, when you can give them an alternative, they start to think, and they're like, wait a minute. And then you'll always have those who are going to be aggressors. Folsom Street Fair coming to Main Street, USA, that's a real thing. But most people do not like this. Most people do not agree with it. And when someone stands up and gives them the alternate view, they will listen.
Well said. You know, many mothers, Kimberly, are concerned about the future their children and grandchildren will inherit. As a conservative, what values do you believe are essential to pass down to the next generation to combat the indoctrination that they're receiving in the public schools?
That is probably the best question I've gotten in a long time, because most people just want to talk about, elections and, what do you care about this candidate? What are you doing for this? What are you doing for that? But the bottom line is, if we want to save this country, if we want to pass this idea of America and what makes it unique down to the future generations, it's the story. The stories are what touch your heart, and your heart is what motivates you to action. So if we can put the stories of America in the hearts of children, in the hearts of mothers, then their minds open up and they listen. And that's how we win. We don't argue. We just share the story of America. And then they're like, what? I didn't know that. We have the greatest epic story of all time when you tell the story of freedom. It didn't start in the United States, but it ended here, and it shouldn't end here. This is just the venue that God chose. Freedom can thrive and prosper in any country with the right ingredients: faith, virtue, patriotism. Those are the things we need to instill in the hearts of our children. We do that through experiences. When we go somewhere, like a perfect example is years ago, I took my children in Washington, D.C., we lived there for 4 years. And for some reason, we'd never gone to Arlington Cemetery. And we were going back to Washington, D.C. for a vacation. And about 3 months before we went, I said, okay, I want them to understand what Arlington Cemetery is about. And so we got these great books and stories, and I started to read to them the stories of the people who were there, the sacrifices that they made. What does the price of freedom mean? We talked about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and why it's so sacred, and why these soldiers walk up and down, and we did the whole entire gamut for 3 months. By the time we got there, my sons were what were they, 9 and 6 at the time, and they get out of the car, and like any other rambunctious kids, they are in the car for a while, they jump out, they're excited, they run to the gate, and they stopped, like a dead stop, and they looked up at the gate. And these other kids jumped out of the car, and they started running in and running past them. And my little 6-year-old boy looked over and said, "Stop. This is a special place. Walk quietly." And I'm like, wow, that's the power of a story. You want to know how to carry it on? You share the story of America with your children. But you can't do that if you don't know it yourself. And most mothers in this country have no idea. I tell people when I go and speak, I can tell you within 5 years how old you are by one simple question. And I just ask the question, how many of you know what the Great American Melting Pot is? And hands will raise up, and I'll say, you're over 50 years old. And anyone who's under 50 who's raised their hand, you had a really good mama who shared a story that no one else is sharing. This is how we save our country.
Wow. Kimberly, you're on the front line, and I can tell you're a very, very positive person. Briefly share with us 2 stories a story that shocked you, like not in a good way, like even you were surprised, and a heartwarming story that's something you saw that was just, emblematic of what Moms for America does.
Oh, that's so good. This is a good week for that. So I would say the one that shocked me the most is how CPS has been weaponized to a degree that has been beyond my comprehension. They've always
CPS,
been something.
explain what that is.
I'm sorry.
Explain what
Oh,
CPS.
I'm sorry. It's Child Protective Services.
Thank you.
So Child Protective Services has always been a blight on our society and a threat to parents, but it's on steroids now. And you have children who are families who are being threatened by having their children being taken away from CPS because they're not transitioning their children. And children now have the power over the adults, and the government is stepping in it. And it's crazy what's going on. So the story that I guess really, a mom in Maine. She's a single mom, and she and her daughter have had a great relationship their whole entire lives. Well, she turned 13 years old, and everybody who turns, 12, 13 years old, you start to wonder who you are, what's your identity. It's already a difficult time, right? So that's when they really start to scoop in, and they push these ideas before then, but they really kind of go in at that level. So her daughter started to come home and just seemed more isolated and more distant, and she became concerned. And so she said, maybe she needs to see the counselor in the school, had a school counselor that she could go to. And so she thought that was a good thing. And then one day she was cleaning her daughter's room and found a breast binder. And she asked her daughter where she got it. And she said, well, the school counselor. Now, this is the thing that I mean, I don't know that anything shocks me anymore, but this just definitely sent shivers up my spine. That we found out that this was a specialist counselor. Okay, so you've got the school counselor, and now schools are either bringing in or hiring full-time a specialist to help children with this transgender ideology and help them transition without their parents' knowledge. And so she went to the principal and she told the principal about the situation. The principal sided with the counselor. So this mom then went to the school board meeting and presented the case and her concerns. And a couple of days later, she gets CPS on her door. So they're weaponizing these government agencies against us. The good part about that story is we are very, very blessed to have an incredible relationship with organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom and Goldwater Institute. And Goldwater Institute picked up her case, and they are now fighting for her. So it's just what's going on out there is beyond comprehension. The really good news story, and I've been wanting to tell this story, I'll tell you, for 6 months, but I had to just hold it back until there was ink on paper. So I wanted to do something that was going to have a dramatic impact in protecting parental rights, protecting our children in real time, giving us something that we could fight back with on a legal level. And so I was meeting with John Rich, the country singer, another favorite John of mine, in January, and he was talking about, what can we do together to help protect kids? And he was telling me some of the things that he had been doing in Tennessee, and one of those was something that he observed, that there are things that you can't say on TV and can't air on the radio that they're allowing in the classroom. And he said we should have the FCC standard. And I was like, oh my gosh, I about exploded. I said, John, the Texas legislature is only in session every other year, and this is the year, and it's an off year. So I got plenty of time to focus on this. I said, let's take it to Texas. And so we've referred to it as the FCC standard bill. So I went to Texas in January, and I met with our consultant there and our state director. And I said, okay, I need to know who are the members of the House and the members of the Senate who are carrying the obscenity bills. Is they're carrying them all over the place. And that's how they're referring to them, as obscenity bills. And gift from God, a very unusual thing is there was one. Everybody had deferred to one representative, Jared Patterson, and he had all the obscenity bills, and they were all bringing them through his office. And so I went and met with him, me and Perla, our state director, and our consultant, Tyler. And I said, okay, you only need one, and one really good one. And all these obscenity bills are mainly focusing on books, but you're not considering the fact that all of this learning is now largely going to digital, and we can't see it. Sky won't even let the school board members see it because of proprietary data. And so I said, and you can't, that doesn't cover the teacher who's speaking or anybody that they bring into the classroom who's promoting this obscenity. And so I said, but if you use the FCC standard, you can't show it on TV and you can't air it on the radio. You can't have it in the classroom. You cannot lose. And so I said, let's look at this bill and make sure that it clearly, covers all of the bases to make that statement a reality. And so he picked a bill. It was HB 900, and we ran with it through the whole entire 6 months of the Texas legislature. It passed through the House and 5 times on the Senate. I mean, on the House floor. And in committee hearing, Representative Pattern said, it's pretty simple, people. He even texted it out. If you can't show it on TV and you can't air it on the radio, you can't have it in the classroom. Like, this is a winning argument here. Who would argue with that? Let's go ahead, stand against that. And so it passed through the House with 10 Democrats voting yes. And then it went to the Senate, and we fought to make sure that nothing was changed, that they had their own Senate bill, and we're like, nope, we want this one. This one's the one Senate needs to pass. And so they did. And then it went to the governor's desk, and this past Monday, Governor Abbott signed it and is now law in the state of Texas. We now have model legislation that we can take across the country, and we are making the FCC standard bill a movement in and of itself. Take it to your state legislatures. We have all the language that you can use, that you can send to them, that they have model legislation they can look at. They have talking points. They've got everything that they need. Let's bring in the FCC standard. And this excited me so much because we have moms who will go into school board meetings and they'll read what their children are being exposed to. And the school board members will shut off their microphones, tell them they can't talk about this. They're escorted out of the hall, sometimes in handcuffs. And the whole thing that they're basing it on, it's on public TV. You can't say those things on public TV. I'm like, are you listening to yourselves? I was like, really?
Yeah.
So that is my biggest exciting win of this year. And I think it's going to be a big win for a long time coming. We've got 6 other states looking at it. It is now currently on the desk of the governor of Louisiana. And I have 8 members of Congress that are drafting bills similar. So I'm very excited about this.
That is a great story. A great story. Let's talk a little bit more about education. So how does Moms for America view the role of parents in shaping the educational landscape, especially in regards to issues like curriculum and content and school choice?
Parents' rights are fundamental and supreme. And there are a lot of bills that have been flashed around in this last legislative session in all 50 states. And everybody's jumping on the whole school choice and parental rights bandwagon. And they all want to have their name on the bill and say, look what we did. But that's very dangerous, quite honestly, because they don't. For instance, there was a bill in Missouri that was put forth by I think it came out of the Senate. And the whole bill was outlining what parental rights are. Here are your parental rights. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. You don't get to list out our parental rights. We just have parental rights across the board. So we fought against that bill. And we went with another bill that someone else was putting forth. And I said, we only need one very simple bill that simply states parental rights are fundamental. Fundamental is a legal term. And if you are in a courtroom, or you are in a school board meeting or standing with a teacher, they have to defer to the parent when you have that fundamental right language clearly identified within the state code. I think it's 27 states that have that, and we're working on getting the rest of them, because it should not go to the government, it should go to the parents. Now that's the legal side of it. Inside internally, we know as parents that it is our right and our responsibility to teach and nurture our children, right? But we're regulating that to the school system. We're now realizing that that's not working right, that everything that we thought, we entrusted our children to these schools, and everything that we thought that our children were learning, the values that were being supported, are not. Exactly the opposite is happening. And there's a great quote, I can't remember the guy who said it, but he said, if you send your children to Caesar schools, don't be surprised when they come home Romans. So we're sending our children to government schools and they're coming home believing in big government and socialism and communism. And we're like scratching our heads going, what's happening? And now they're coming home not sure if they're a boy or a girl. And they just want to be the cool kids. You know, I don't want to stand against, and they're intimidated. They're bullied by adults. Adults are intimidating and bullying them. And so while parents are standing up and they're saying, oh my gosh, we need to fight against this, I will tell you that the greatest role of a parent in the education and curriculum of their child is to know what they're being taught and do not go away. Be a part of the process. Like I said, we entrusted our children to these schools, and now we realize what's going on, but mostly parents are out there fighting against something. I'm like, okay, great. Tell them what you don't want, but give them something that you do want. And I'm telling you, I'm hearing from a lot of school board members and a lot of teachers who are saying, okay, well then to give us an alternative, because all the textbooks out there are loaded with this stuff and it's all they have. So give us an alternative. So I would say, instead of just complaining, unite with other parents in the community and come up with solutions. Work with other organizations like ours and others out there who can provide solutions and other alternatives to help teach the principles and values that we want taught in the school. At the very basic is real science, true history, math that actually makes sense and calculates. Let's do that. So the most important thing that parents can do is not turn away. Don't just think you won a battle when the masks went away. It's still there. They're fighting for the hearts and minds of your children. You need to know that. And whether you want to pull them out of school or keep them in school, run for school board or serve on the school board, our Empower Moms pathway provides information, support, and encouragement in every step of the way. So get engaged, get connected, and fight for your kids.
Kimberly, we have some great questions here. I'm going to kind of combine them. There's one from Jordan R. and another one from Paul D. Jordan's commenting about this bill that California can, forcibly remove parents if they don't transition their kids, won't allow it. Paul's saying, hey, I have friends that are teachers and they're saying that there's really no CRT being taught. But the reason I'm combining it is this. The left, it's amazing how quickly that we go from conspiracy theory to conspiracy fact. So the left is like, we're not after your stoves, and lo and behold, they want to take away our stoves. We're not teaching CRT. Yes, they are. What's wrong with CRT? I mean, so I guess the question is, the left will say you're an evil parent because you don't acknowledge your child's gender dysphoria. You're an evil parent because you don't want the good teachers to let kids know that slavery happened. It's all a lie. Like, they have so twisted it on that you standing up for moms or kids makes you out to be the bad guy. So how would you, if you were talking to a mom that opposed you, how would you talk to them about, parental rights and CRT and transitioning kids without butting heads, because you're a very positive person, where they've turned it upside down? We have to put it right back the way it's supposed to be.
I was actually just talking to a parent about this a couple months ago, and it was specifically about CRT. And she said, well, first of all, that's just a made up, word, and it's an acronym, and it's not a real thing. They're just teaching our kids real history. And I said, oh, and she happened to be one of there were three of them. Two of them were white, and one of them happened to be like half Black and half Hispanic. So I had, pretty much the gamut there. And they were all opposed to everything that I was saying. It was after I spoke at a meeting. And I said, okay, so let me first, I first want to ask you a question, if you want to have a discussion about it. And I always say that. And I said, do you think that your children should be taught that they have to be a tree? And they're looking at me like, what? Do you think that the school should mandate that your child accept the fact that they're a tree? Child's not a tree. Are you sure your child's not a tree? And so I just started to have this conversation, and I said, okay, so that may sound absurd to you, but it sounds absurd to me when somebody tells me your child might not be a boy, your child might not be a girl. And I don't think that the school should be teaching things like that, because my child is a girl or a boy, and that's just basic biological science. And how you feel doesn't change who you are. And And I said, and when it comes to CRT, the teachers will tell you all the time when they're for this, or mainly the teachers' unions are talking about this isn't being taught. And I said, but I have a copy of the October 2020 and 2021 NEA magazine that goes out to the members of their teacher members all across the country. And the whole entire magazine sent to us by half a dozen different teachers who were their heads were exploding over this. The whole magazine was talking about how they're teaching racism within the classrooms. And they didn't call it racism, they called it race. Why is it that people are so opposed to teaching about race? And they openly stated, heralded, and celebrated all of those teachers who were teaching and promoting CRT in every single subject from kindergarten to 12th grade. In math, in science, in PE, in art, in music class. And they were saying, this is how we do it. This is how we do it, encouraging other teachers to do it and making it sound like a good thing. And that's what I told these moms. And they were like, what? And I said, you can't opt out of this. There is no opt out. There's not even the opt in. Alaska did a great bill several years ago where they said, I want to opt my child in. If you think they should be in these sex classes, then you convince me and I'll opt them in. It was brilliant. We don't have that luxury anymore because it's filled in every single subject. The sexualization of our children, they're teaching our children literally every day to hate our country, hate their neighbor, hate themselves, and completely disregard their parents. That is what they are learning. That is the truth and the fact of it. And it's not just in public school. It's in Christian, parochial, and private schools as well. And I'm hearing from moms in all of those areas. The one thing we have going for us in the public school system is we have an avenue to fight it. In the private school system, you really don't. And if you don't like it, there's a whole bunch of people, dozens of families that are ready to take your place if you leave that really expensive, posh, private school. Yeah. So to culminate everything, I would say that if you have values that you want to teach your children, do you want those values countered? And in a public school setting, if we just focus on just the subjects themselves, you want your child to read well, you want them to have good opportunities to succeed. And literally that's what all moms care about. And I will tell you that when I talk to moms, no matter where they're at, no matter what race they are, what color they are, what demographic they come from, what their past experience is, I can tell you that every single mother in this country cares about the same three things. They first and foremost want the safety, protection of their children. Second, a good education. And third, opportunities to succeed. And if we focus on those things, freedom wins, and so does common sense. And that's what we focus on when we talk to them.
Very, very, very well said. One of the subjects that's near and dear to my heart, the left in the 1960s and 70s brought up the issues of feminism and fighting for women's rights and equality. And a lot of good things came out of that. But now they seem to be turning their back on girls and young women in athletics who are forced to compete against a guy who just claims that he's a girl and he's physically superior, and he goes in and he just blows up, all the records away and holds his trophy up in the air. Well, all these girls and young women have worked so hard for so many years to be the best that they can be. And I don't see too many people standing up for those rights of women and young girls. What are your thoughts on that?
You bring up such a good point about the feminists, because I'm literally scratching my head and befuddled. I mean, the feminists have been about killing babies, which is killing, more than half of the babies killed are girls. And at every step of the way, since winning the rights and since having Title IX and all of these things, they're now women are actually using Title IX against women to allow men to compete in women's sports. And not just that, but they're in the same locker rooms. These men who are still men are undressing in front of these women. And I will tell you, as a woman, it is already uncomfortable. We're not as good at getting naked in front of other other people like men are. We don't like that. We don't like, it's already uncomfortable for us to be in that position. You throw a man in there who's obviously a man, and I will tell you, that is the most cowardly thing. These are people who cannot succeed in their own competitive arena. And so they take advantage and they decide, oh, I'm a girl now. And why is everybody buying into this? That's what drives me crazy. I told moms, I said, if you really want to turn this culture around, then you do it by reading specific stories to your children. At the top of the list should be The Emperor's New Clothes. And you read that book to them every single day so that they'll look around and go, hello, the emperor's naked. Somebody put clothes on the dude. And I mean, this is where we are, where none of it makes any sense. So we've been pushing back on this, and there is a House bill in Congress that was put to for the purpose of protecting women's sports, and it's at the Senate's House now, and Biden has already said he's not going to sign it. And so we wanted to send a powerful message. Somebody needs to stand up and talk about this. So just a couple weeks ago, we did a press conference in Washington, D.C. at House Triangle with members of Congress and national and international sports figures who came and spoke about their own personal experiences. These women who lost opportunities or were forced in a situation where they had to be beside this man who was naked. And it's despicable. And then you tie that into what happened in Washington and at the White House when they're celebrating Pride Month, and this guy who's got fake boobs is out there exposing himself. And I mean, and then for the White House to say, well, obviously that was inappropriate and that person isn't going to be invited anymore. You know what? You opened that box. You created this. You manufactured it. You think that you open up Pandora's box and you get to decide what comes out? You think you can get it back in? That's not how that works. So the only way that we are going to be able to fight this is to keep sharing the stories, keep having a powerful voice. And the whole entire month of June, when they're all talking about Pride Month, we are countering that culture in multiple ways, including going after Target. And we didn't boycott Target just to boycott a company for peddling wares nobody wants. And let's be honest, who wants that garbage? Even I have so many gay people in organizations and things that we work with. I'm like, what do you guys think about that? Like, why would we want to dress nice? We just want to live our lives. We just want to be like live like everybody else, and we don't. Why would you do that? These are activists, and a lot of them aren't even transgender or gay. They're just being paid to be out there and create chaos. Case in point was in Texas when we were fighting for this bill to protect children from being transgendered. You want to transition? Fine. When you're 18 years old and you are an adult and you want to go do that, have at it. But you're not in the state of Texas. It's illegal. That bill passed. And there was a Democrat, a woman who was in the House or the Senate. I'm not sure which one. She was in legislature, and she passed it, and she got brutally just attacked. And she's like, I'm going to do what's right for these kids. And she said, I've researched it. I've looked at all the science, and I've looked at the world. Every country in Europe that thought this was a great idea is now seeing the results, and they're pulling away from it. Why are we still running into it? So we have to start standing up and telling the stories and countering the culture. And with the Target boycott that we did, it was about using Target to send a powerful message to every single corporation, media, entertainment industry out there, sports industry. We are the keepers of the purse, and we are going to not support any company, corporation, media, sports, entertainment that pushes the CSG on their employees or on the public. And we're not going to we're going to actively oppose anyone who does do this ESG, which is a totally made up farce. And if people don't know what that is, it's environmental, social, and governance, which is
governance.
It's communism 101 is what it is. And DEI is that's what everything that they're doing with trying to push these radical ideas on our kids. And all of this is out there as a means to steal the hearts and minds of our children. And we are going to stand against it at every level. And that's what we're going to have to do, because there are way more of us than there are of them.
Thank you, Kimberly. unfortunately, we've come to the end of our hour. We could speak for another hour if we had the time, but we appreciate your insight, your patriotism, your support of Judeo-Christian values and standing up for what you believe is right and for fighting for those values. Kimberly Fletcher, Moms for America, thank you for being here once again.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience, guys.
Oh, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here on another great edition of JRA Loudspeaker. Continue to stay informed, get involved, and make a difference. We want to resume live events again in some of our cities. We're looking for people to get involved and be part of a leadership committee, and whether it's in Tennessee or Las Vegas or Southern California or in New Jersey or all the places where we have budding chapters. If you want to step up and be a leader, send us an email, get involved, and make a difference. Thank you all for being here. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Have a great weekend.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye, Kimberly.
Bye, Kimberly.
Bye.